So today's story is Zaccheus. Zaccheus probably one of the most popular and famous person in the story of Bible, especially in Jesus' time. Zaccheus is symbolic, as we know, particularly when you grew up in Sunday school. This is very interesting character, right? His height is short, and he's rich, and he's a good social position in terms of his job. He's a chief of tax collector. And also children love that he climbed up the sycamore tree. Some version says sycamore tree, NIV, ESV says sycamore fig tree. So this sycamore fig tree is also nature's object. So it holds these stories. The character comes out very different, colorful ways. So maybe you don't have to go over these whole stories, but we know that Zacchaeus was a short person and he was despised. Although he had some kind of successful life, he wasn't respected a lot. We know that story that when Jesus later entered his house, people started blaming Jesus. We know how Zacchaeus was considered, how he was called. When Jesus and his disciples entered Zacchaeus' home, they said, they entered into the sinner's home, sinner's house. They didn't even mention his name. The only reason we know this name, Zacchaeus, his Bible tells that, and also Jesus calls him by his name. But other than that, people called him sinner. Maybe he was successful in his job in terms of not only he's rich, but he's a chief of tax collectors. And we know why he was despised, why he was called sinners. It's not only Zacchaeus' life. Throughout that Jesus' time, we know that the tax collector and sinner, these two words always appear together. 세리와 죄인, tax collector and sinners. So it's kind of the same meaning. Tax collector means sinners. Why? Because tax collectors work for the outsiders. Not only outsiders, not only he worked together with this Roman authority or the King Herod's authority, who was the Gentiles, not Gentiles, but oppressors. Not only they work for the outside Gentile occupier, the way of earning the money is that they don't get monthly salary from this Roman authority. For Jericho, the town that he lives and he works for, there are residents of this size. In Jericho, there are usually people in and out. So, from Jericho, we should get this much amount of taxes, a set amount. So we expect that you bring this amount of money as a tax. That means this tax, whether from the entering gate or from each house or from the commercial stores, and then the remaining, after he gave to this authority, will be his profit. So that means if he is able to get as much as possible, he will get more profits. And he was successful because he was a chief collector. That means he probably started from the bottom and that he was very useful, very successful in taking monies. That's why Roman authority acknowledged, he's good, getting more monies. So he probably stepped up and up in this ladder. And he became a chief of tax collectors. So even one tax collector can be despised by general population of Israelites. But since he's a chief, it says that probably there will be lengths of time that he's been doing his tax collecting job. And not only the length of time, there are so many incidents and stories accumulate up to this point. How he entered the house, how he entered the stores, how he stood up and then took money. No matter what kind of means, no matter what kind of method. So that's why he was just despised and a sinner. But somehow this person, Zacchaeus, had internally missing heart. That's why he wanted to see Jesus. Because he heard that Jesus healed the sick. Jesus had a meal with sinners. He fed the hungry. He performed the miracles. He became very famous. And disciples and Jesus are entering Jericho. And he heard probably among the Jesus disciples are coming to Jericho. It's Matthew. Matthew was also in Galilee area. Matthew was a tax collector. So probably Zaccheus heard among his disciples, there's a tax collector, Matthew. How come Matthew became a disciple of Jesus? How come Jesus called him, another tax collector, to be a disciple? And Matthew just gave up everything and followed him. And he's coming to this way. So probably so many things that caused him to go out to see him. Well, today is a Thanksgiving Day, so I'm sure that this story gives us this picture of thankful action of Zaccheus. You know that, so no one allowed him to go in the front to see this crowd of Jesus marching through the town. So as we know, he climbed up to a sycamore tree. And then from there, amazing thing happened. The Bible says Jesus and his people entered and then passed through. That was the intention. That was also even Zaccheus' expectation. But Jesus stood where? In front of the tree. And then Jesus, very surprising way, called Zaccheus by his name. Zaccheus. Zaccheus came down. Zaccheus, come down. Immediately, I must stay at your house today. That's verse 5. Not only calls his name, among these all people who believes Zaccheus is a sinner. Not only called him name, come down, let's shake a hand. Jesus saying that I want to stay in your house today. It's a true surprise for him and also all the disciples and probably the town people who gathered there. And the scripture says that Zaccheus came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Although it doesn't say the word thankfulness or gratefulness, we know that probably his heart is filled with thankfulness. That's why he just came down so gladly and he welcomed him. The whole gesture is how much he's thankful to Jesus. And then he also said this. Verse 8, but Zaccheus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Wow, so it must be something that Jesus entered his house. It must be something for him that Jesus called his name. It must be something that Jesus stayed in his house. So this is very special turn of the event, the change of stories. This story of Zaccheus' gratefulness to Jesus and action of gratefulness, I'd like to share 3 things. First thing is things he did not thank. And second is things he would thank. And third, things he should practice thankfulness. He was not thankful for, we are thankful, which is he's been rich. God, I'm so thankful. No matter what others sees me, I have these possessions. You allow me to have financial success. He didn't think about the last promotion. Being a chip collector as a social position, one of the reasons that he can be thankful. Because that's usually we are thankful. In Thanksgiving offering envelope, it says, what are you thankful for this year? Usually the first thing is something good. And something not only good, but something concrete and our titles. But he didn't think about it. I mean, this is a great chance to say, Jesus, God blessed me. And they don't understand. But in these very difficult situations, in this very confusing society, God blessed me. So I'm rich. And I'm a cheap in my job. We know for sure that he didn't think about it. If he was so thankful about his possessions, his job, title, he wouldn't give up so easily half of his possessions. Maybe he could show some kind of mercy, but not half of his positions. Not 4 times of what he cheated. Then what he was so thankful on these stories? It doesn't show us the details what happened while Jesus and his crowd staying with Zaccheus' house. We don't know what happened. What kind of conversation occurred? What kind of story Jesus told? Or what kind of blessing Jesus gave? It's very fast move stories. But probably he would be very thankful that Jesus came to his house. The house symbolizes the center of his life. And why people blame Jesus? Not only he shared the fellowship with the sinners, but he entered the sinner's house. Why? Because you are not supposed to go to Gentiles' house if you are good and faithful Jews. Not only they are bad, but the law of purity. Because in Gentiles' house, he's not Gentile, but sinners. The sinners means like if he's a Gentile, he's not Gentile. But if he's a Gentile, you don't know what kind of object they touch, what kind of food they prepared. So even now, like faithful Jewish people, they might invite others to their place, but they never go to the other people's place. Why? Because the food, they don't know how it was prepared. Probably people, when they pass by Zaccheus' house, they probably spit at the house. When I was in Nashville, Tennessee, one day we had small group kind of service, and then we talked a lot, we sang. It's not my apartment, it's my sister's apartment. And it was a little late. And the next morning, in front of our apartment doors, there's eggs. Neighbors passing by, they threw eggs and other stuff. So there was all the garbages and eggshell. I felt scared. I wish they just come and then knock the door and then ask, but they just do the things. I bet Zaccheus had so many instances like this. They knew this is sinners, enemies, terrible persons. Who took my money? Who took my friend's money? But that's where Jesus wanted to go in. Not just Jesus told Zaccheus in secretly and separately. So many people are seeing us, so I let you we'll meet quiet place in town somewhere. But Jesus publicly, when all people surrounded there, when they seeing this Zaccheus on the top of the tree, Jesus asked, not Jesus invited, Jesus asked, can I stay in your house? I'd like to stay in your house. And that's what God does to us. God came to our lives. God wanted to come into our lives, not because we have a great social positions, great success, great righteousness. As Jesus said at the end of the story, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. This is how Zaccheus felt the true grace, God, who Jesus was. His forgiveness was so real. Not only his forgiveness, his power of transformation is so wonderful. His love is real. So as we see here, he just came down at once and gladly welcomed him. And it's really not to show up to people, but seems it's Jesus' invitation and Jesus asking and Jesus staying is something that he's missing so hard. He thought that if he gather more money, higher positions, then maybe it will fulfill my heart. Now he knows that what is more valuable. But the story doesn't end there. Maybe the story ends there, but we are curious, which is third portion. Things he should practice or he should expect. There are two things that he should expect. Challenges. His thankful life will be very challenging in his life that comes. That is a social challenge and the persistency of challenge. Zaccheus said two things. First thing is that I'll just give half of my possessions to the poor. Then sometimes I'm wondering, why half? Why not whole? Why half? I think he really meant it. Why? Because second part. Second part is, if I have cheated, of course he have. If I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. I'll give up my half for the poor. It doesn't make his life change it. Because he harmed so many people. He's so responsible for real people. Maybe a little bit of abstract concept of the poor. That's very important, of course. His life now is changing that way. But he knows that there are real people, that I'm very responsible. And I'll give 4 times what I cheated for each person. So remaining half will be used to repay. It shows very important part of his reality, his willingness. He said, I'll give my half to the poor. That he can do right away. If I have cheated anybody out of anything. In Korean, 만일 누구의 것을 속여 빼앗은 일이 있으면 만일, if. I thought first time, he's kidding. Of course, he have cheated. Why he says if? I thought maybe he's thinking, I might not have cheated. But I understand this part now. If you live whole your life as your own value, thinking that value is right, and you are convinced that this is the right life, then you don't know. With that value, with who you are, you don't know how much, how many, when, what, where. You cannot count because that's your whole life. Zacchaeus' life is not just, I remember that person I cheated. I remember that time there I cheated. It's not, because his whole life he lived for the getting the money. He lived for the getting the higher positions. So whatever he does, cheating is his way of life. And when something is your way of life, you don't know the details. Maybe he knows this side. So he's saying that I'll do my work. If anybody I have cheated, I'll find. And then I'll give back 4 times. That is persistence. It's not just momentarily emotional statement. It's a dedication of his life, which shows that now my life, the goal, my value is different. That's why he's not thankful about his becoming rich, he becoming high position. And it's going to be hard. Whenever he will meet somebody, it will bring him very painful the past what he did, what it caused, his lustful life, his self-centered life, his money-seeking life. What kind of damage is done, not only to him, for his neighbors. Sometimes I'm really wondering what happened to Zacchaeus later. We don't know. Zacchaeus only appears in this story, only in Luke, only chapter 19. We don't know what happened. Whether he gave up his job and followed just like Matthew did, I don't know. But I'm sure that if he stayed, he probably started earning much less. His way of doing his job probably changed. Maybe some point he couldn't do it anymore. And another challenge is this social pressure. When Zacchaeus gladly welcomed Jesus and Jesus entered the house, then people might consider that now he might be a good person, he might be changed. No. While already Jesus is entering his house, people, as we just already covered, said he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. So he has already this social judgment, social title. He has been a sinner. He's a sinner. He will be a sinner. No matter what he does, people might think, really? Can he be changed? I don't know. I don't think so. And people will be very suspicious of whatever he does. So maybe for him, he will continue to face people saying, people looking, maybe another throw about eggs. What he said. It's not just, I want to show my kindness so that I can recover my social status. No. If he wanted that, probably he had other ways. But the way he said, it changed his life values. Money and title is something that he lived for, despite all the condemnation, was a high priority. But he gave up this high priority. That means he's determined. He's determined. So on this Thanksgiving Sunday, of course, we can be thankful for things that we can see and everyone can see. But the thankfulness never be satisfying, never be content, never be true thankfulness. Then it's not helping our thankfulness. So this time of Thanksgiving, let's receive God into our heart again. In the center of our life, like house, like home of our heart. What is the most valuing things? Our value system in our life. Would you invite God and Jesus and His love, His presence, His salvation? That'll make you free. That'll make you liberated. That'll make you start new life. And that life will be challenging. Maybe you are going through a time of challenging life. Whatever you want to do, still people are not receiving well. Not only that, maybe you are the other side of story. You are not receiving others. You just labeled one person in your heart. And then you want to make a group of people just labeling one person at the same way, always. It's not grateful heart. Because this heart is just filled with, I'm righteous, I'm better. Although maybe you're saying I'm thankful, actually you are saying that I'm great. Let's be thankful because of God's love for me and for you. Although we are sinners, although we are weak, Jesus entered in our heart and He's asking us, then let's give our heart to this consistent life of discipleship. It's not just matter of moment or matter of just emotion. Change our values. And continuous grace will help us to live out true life of thankfulness.